Hey everyone, it's DPX. Got something a little different for you today. Normally, when a game comes out that I'm looking forward to, I'll play through it and review it for you guys. For the past few weeks, there have been a few games that have come out that I haven't reviewed for you guys. You know, I've had some, I've been busy lately, so I haven't been able to, I have been able to play these games, but I haven't been able to really record a review until now. Some of them I wasn't able to play right away. So I got 4 games for you today. I got Shinobi Art of Vengeance, Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, I got Sword of the Sea, and I got Hollow Knight Silksong. That last one's gonna be a little different. I didn't finish the game. I don't plan on doing like a full review necessarily. I'll just give you my thoughts on it. But yeah, I'm gonna do this a little differently. Normally my reviews get broken up into like 4 segments: the good, the mix, the bad, and the final verdict. This one, it is still kind of gonna be like that, but since I'm talking about 4 games, 3 of them are gonna be reviews, I'm sort of just gonna like keep talking. Like, it's not gonna necessarily be broken up into segments, okay? Anyways, let's get into this. But before we get into that, you know what to do. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell, and leave a comment, or I will just give you a lot of work to do. Yep, first we got Shinobi Art of Vengeance, a game I was really looking forward to. You know, I have a strong attachment to the Sega Genesis games. I think I mentioned that somewhere in here, actually. But, I was really excited for Shinobi, yeah, so starting off with the good, Shinobi Art of Vengeance just feels sick to play. Just running from point A to point B and killing everyone in your way just feels satisfying. There's also a lot of platforming, I guess you can call it that. Like, there's a dash, grappling hook, wall jumping, you know the deal. It all feels really cool and makes traversal very engaging. But then the combat. I've heard a lot of people calling Shinobi a fighting game, just nonchalantly referring to the game as a fighting game, which I always found odd. I understand they aren't confusing this with games like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, but it's not a fighting game. However, I get the comparison because it actually has a lot of fighting game elements. You string together combos to beat enemies, which isn't something exclusive to fighting games, sure, but it does actually feel a bit like a fighter, and I don't mean that in a bad way. These combos are very fun, and I also really do like the boss fights. These can be very challenging depending on how you choose to play the game, but they feel satisfying. And even after finishing the game, you unlock a boss rush mode, where you fight all the bosses, but it's almost like a roguelike, as you don't heal after each fight, your health and damage carry over, so you have to be wise about how you play. Shinobi Art of Vengeance is also a pseudo-Metroidvania. What I mean is that it has Metroidvania elements, but not quite a full-blown Metroidvania. It's got those elements where you see certain paths that you can't go until you unlock an ability or solve a certain puzzle that will let you unlock that path. But Shinobi is not one big interconnected world like your usual Metroidvania, but instead multiple levels, giving it an arcade-like feel, while still implementing Metroidvania elements very well. I think this works, and sure, you can get lost in some levels, and not necessarily in a fun way, but overall, it helps Shinobi stand on its own. But another thing that helps this game stand on its own is the aesthetic. Now is when I mentioned that Shinobi Art of Vengeance is developed by Lizard Cube. They also developed Wonder Boy, Dragon's Trap, and Streets of Rage 4. And if you notice anything about those 2 games, they are both older Sega IPs that they are doing nothing with at the moment. And so is Shinobi. So I guess if Sega wants to revive their older franchises, but don't actually want to do it themselves, they'll just hire Lizard Cube. But this is about the aesthetic, and I bring up Lizard Cube because Wonder Boy and Streets of Rage have the same aesthetic as Shinobi, and it's 3 for 3 because it pops. This kind of gives off the idea that this is an older franchise coming back. Not necessarily a retro aesthetic, but the aesthetic gives the vibes of a retro revival, if that makes sense. Other things I liked, the story isn't really anything that much. It's not trying to be anything that crazy. It's not gonna win any awards or anything, but I like how crazy the setup and premise is. You play as Joe Musashi, the series mascot, who doesn't actually speak, he only grunts, and he's not only the leader and sensei of the Oboro clan, but also a loving husband and soon-to-be father. He seeks revenge on those who targeted his clan and village. Where it gets crazy is who he is seeking revenge on, as it's an organization of mutants and cyborgs run by someone with godlike powers, of which he stole from the Grim Reaper. Sure, that's not super layered or anything, like that, but did you fucking hear what I just said? I really don't think we need much more than that. The music also slaps. The original Shinobi games aren't particularly known for having, fire soundtracks, but they do. Their OSTs go super hard. It's just not talked about that much, though. In Art of Vengeance, however, the music is awesome. And lastly, it's just classic Shinobi. I obviously wasn't around during the Sega Genesis, but when I was younger, I got introduced to that console's library through collections, and I took a liking to Shinobi. So I'm super happy to see that Shinobi Art of Vengeance keeps what makes the original games epic while making it feel fresh and new. But that's the good stuff. What about the mixed? These aren't things that I'm necessarily are negative. They maybe won't take away from the score. But these are things that I feel like are worth mentioning that I didn't want to put in the bad. And in the case of this game, I have two things that I don't really have issues with, but they are worth mentioning, so I'm throwing them in the mix. One is that the game is rather short. I'm feeling a little deja vu as I mentioned this exact same thing when I reviewed Ninja Gaiden Ragebound earlier this year. Funnily enough, another revival of an older, dormant game series starring a ninja. But just like that game, Shinobi Art of Vengeance isn't really designed to be this big 20-hour experience. I'd say my playthrough was at most 10 hours, maybe even less, which is fine. In fact, had it been longer, maybe it could have overstayed its welcome. But just letting you know. And another thing to let you know is that Shinobi Art of Vengeance can be tough. But I put emphasis on can be, because you can easily change the difficulty settings, and even beyond that, there are certain ways to play the game that you can choose that may or may not make the game more challenging. This game definitely is more forgiving and more welcoming than Ragebound was. However, keep in mind, the default difficulty is also the hardest difficulty, which I feel most games don't do, so that's kinda odd. Not an issue. If it was bad, it would be in the bad, but worth mentioning. But now to move on to the bad, one thing I want to mention is while this is a Metroidvania, sort of, a pseudo-Metroidvania, and I do like how it implemented those elements, Shinobi Art of Vengeance does suffer from a problem I have with Metroidvanias, and that is becoming, as the angry video game nerd puts it, where the fuck do I go kind of game. The type that makes you wonder where the fuck do you go. It's not that bad, and if you use the map, you should be good, but there were times where it got a little frustrating. And the other issue I have is specific to the version of the game I played, as I played it on Switch 2. However, there is no Switch 2 version of Shinobi Art of Vengeance. There is just a Switch 1 version, which I played on Switch 2. And apparently the performance is worse, but that didn't bother me. However, if that is the case, then that does seriously suck. But it is obvious that playing this game on Switch 2, you are playing a weirdly optimized Switch 1 game. It's a little hard to explain, and it's even more noticeable in handheld mode, as it does look a little rough. Not too bad by any means, but it is unfortunate. Overall, sure I had some issues, but Shinobi Art of Vengeance is a straight up banger. An epic return to the franchise, and Lizard Cube keeps proving themselves capable of these revivals. This is the first game out of that batch of revivals Sega announced a couple years ago, if you remember, that also included Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi, Golden Axe, and Streets of Rage. So if this is anything to go off of, a new era of banger Sega games may finally be upon us. But for now, Shinobi Art of Vengeance, it does a superb job of blending action elements and Metroidvania elements along with keeping the charm and badassery of the original. In the end, I give Shinobi Art of Vengeance a 9.5 out of 10. That's my review for Shinobi Art of Vengeance, but let's move on to...
Commencing virtuous mission now.
That's right, I'm reviewing Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. Starting off with the good, Snake Eater Delta is pretty much a beat-by-beat remake of the original. Now, I'll actually get into some issues with that a bit later, but as for being able to preserve the original game whilst modernizing it with new visuals and whatnot, it does the job. But I think this is especially commendable that it leaves the original's content mainly unchanged, as there are definitely some moments in Snake Eater that, had it been released today, maybe wouldn't go over so well. Those moments are unchanged in Delta, which maybe you want to say and complain about it being problematic, and you may have a point. but I think it is very commendable to keep what was in the game. That, and I also really love how it pays tribute to Kojima and the original team and cast. It's no secret, Hideo Kojima, you know, the father of the Metal Gear series, had a pretty notoriously ugly departure from Konami. And for a while, it felt like Konami was trying to do everything wrong with Metal Gear on purpose just to get back at Kojima. So it's really cool to see that not only is Konami very respectful of Snake Eater when remaking it, they were very respectful of Kojima, making it very clear that this is a remake of a game by him. Because Snake Eater Delta is very faithful, that means a lot of what worked in the original Snake Eater is very present in Delta. For example, the story. Metal Gear stories are all over the fucking place, to the point where it's a bit of a meme, but Snake Eater tells an interesting story about Snake and his relationship with the boss, which I always found very compelling. Stuff like the Snake Codex are back as well, which were always a nice touch. It just adds so much personality and character to the MGS games, and I can't imagine it without it. Basically, any praises I can give the original, I can also give Delta. The music is great. I have things to say about one song in particular, but the music overall is great. The combat and stealth gameplay is really solid, no pun intended. Actually, pun absolutely intended, I take it back. But I really like how the game gives you an option to play the game as if it was the original Snake Eater, or with like modernized controls. I did use both, and I really liked both, but to be honest, I kind of really like the modern version more. I guess since this is a remake and that is a new way to play the game, I just gravitated towards it. As for other things, I guess if any new addition to Delta is worth mentioning, it's the visuals. It's probably the biggest change, if anything. I'll get more into this game on a technical aspect, but the visuals are great. I actually still think the original Snake Eater holds up pretty well today visually, but Delta gives the game a nice facelift. I'm also really happy that they brought back other modes. Right, the original Snake Eater didn't just have the main story. It also has online, which is coming, but at a later date, but it's still really cool that they are adding it in the first place. They could have just put this out and had to be the main story, but they didn't. But then there's also Snake vs. Monkey. It was a minigame in the PS2 version, like the original version of Snake Eater, where it's a bizarre and incredibly endearing crossover between Metal Gear Solid and Ape Escape, and it's back. It's fun and even has some cameos in there. But because Ape Escape is a PlayStation IP, that means Snake vs. Monkey is only on PlayStation and PC, okay? But the Xbox version doesn't miss out, as instead of Snake vs. Monkey, they get Snake vs. Bomberman, a crossover between MGS and Bomberman. Interesting. They also brought back Guy Savage, like from the original Metal Gear Solid 3. Like that hidden game within the game that was like a hack and slash game. Now kind of reminds me of Bloodborne a little bit. It's cool that it's here. Overall, Metal Gear Solid Delta is an amazing and faithful remake. But not everything is perfect, so moving on to the things I'm more mixed on. First off, it's something that I've heard everyone mention, and it's that they redid the iconic Snake Eater theme song. Now, the original is a musical masterpiece, especially when paired with the intro that plays. So good. But it's not like the lack of it kills this game, and it's here, but they got a new singer and it clearly sounds different. Doesn't sound bad, but it is noticeable. And the other thing I'm mixed on, and it's something that I praise the game for, but it can also be spun into a negative, and that's how Snake Eater Delta is very faithful. Now don't get me wrong, not every remake needs to completely redo the game. They don't all need to be like FF7, Silent Hill 2, or the Resident Evil remakes. A remake like Snake Eater Delta is always welcome. However, the original Snake Eater is still rather accessible today due to its inclusion in the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection, so you can buy it with 2 other games, or you can buy the Master Collection version of the game by itself for $20, and I can't really say that Delta is that much better than the original. In many ways, it might actually be inferior. Again, nothing wrong with that, as the original Snake Eater is one of the best games of all time, and I want to be clear, Delta is a really good remake. But if you have never played Snake Eater before, you do kind of get a much better deal with the Master Collection version. I put it in the mixed because I don't think that entirely makes Snake Eater obsolete, but yeah. On to the bad aspects of Snake Eater Delta. One thing that the game actually made headlines for is its performance, specifically on console. Now, I played on a base PS5, but I didn't actually play till like a week after it released, so perhaps they patched the game within that week, because I didn't experience horrible performance on PS5. However, there were moments that left a lot to be desired on the performance front, like during boss fights, or like when there's just a lot of like particle effects going on. The game did kind of like chug a little bit. The other issue I have is the AI, because at times I would shoot them like 7 times before they would actually die. I know your first instinct is to say, haha, get good, but there were moments where I perfectly aimed at an enemy and nothing happened, which was frustrating. I haven't heard anyone else bring this up though, so maybe it's just me. Overall, sure, Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater isn't better than the original Snake Eater, but I'm also not quite sure it's trying to be. It does an amazing job remaking a classic for the modern era, while keeping just about everything about the game there. Most people took issue with how Konami basically just re-released a PS2 game in 2025 for $70, and that is more or less the case, but I still think it's a great and faithful remake. It's Snake Eater as you know it, but it looks really good, and you can play it in a different style. Sometimes, that's all you really need in a remake. In the end, I give Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater a very specific 8.7 out of 10. I know, like, that's, like, why even bother giving it that, which is give it an 8.5 or a 9. I don't want to. I think it's in between those two. But that's my review for Snake Eater Delta. Now let's move on to... Yup, Sword of the Sea. This multi-review actually wasn't going to include this game originally, but I decided at the last minute to pick this up, and saw how short it was too, so it wouldn't delay this video by that much. So, yeah, let's get into it. So starting off with the good, just the overall atmosphere and world within Sword of the Sea is really cool. Sure, visually and aesthetically, which I'll get into in a little bit, but just the overall vibe of this world, and just feeling the atmosphere, if that makes sense. It all just feels really good. The visuals, of course, as I just alluded to like 2 seconds ago, add a lot too. Now is when I mentioned that Sword of the Sea is kind of like a spiritual successor to Journey, a game of which is probably best known for its visuals and aesthetic. It's also mostly made by people who made Journey, and you can just tell. The aesthetic pops. Probably will get it a Best Art Direction nomination this year, and is just visually appealing to look at. I never really mentioned the gameplay though, and that's because the gameplay is rather simple. You basically surf around this huge area on a sword, and you go around kind of restoring the area, if that makes sense. Like, you start in an area covered in sand everywhere, but then you restore the land with its grass and leaves and all that. There isn't really much combat, like, at all in this game, but at times it almost feels like a Tony Hawk game, as it almost feels like you're doing tricks and stuff, surfing on the sword. Also gotta mention the music. It does a stellar job at setting the tone and fitting with the atmosphere, and it's just great. Sword of the Sea isn't anything groundbreaking, but it's neat. But now I'm gonna do something I have never done before, and that's do the mixed slash the bad. And I'm doing that because there wasn't really anything that bad about Sword of the Sea. Not that it's like a perfect 10 out of 10, but there was nothing in here to really call bad. However, pretty much what you see here is what you get. This is a very small game, and there isn't much to say about it. It's a 2-hour game as well. You can probably finish it in one sitting, as I did, and I don't even feel like I rushed it at all. That's not a bad thing by any means. Sometimes a game like this is neat. It's more of a mixed thing, but it also comes with the fact that, well, there's just not much to this one. And not in a bad way, I'm not necessarily saying that disparagingly, but there just isn't much more to say. I enjoyed Sword of the Sea. Especially, you know, it's on PS Plus Premium, or I think Extra actually, for free, so it's not a bad pickup there. It's a game that focuses more on environments and the atmosphere and its visuals, and kind of designs the game around that, but does so in a clever and engaging way. This review was rather short, sure, but that's because by the nature of this game, there isn't much to it. There is about as much as there needs to be, and you can't always go wrong with that. I'm gonna give Sword of the Sea an 8 out of 10. So yeah, that was my review of Sword of the Sea. I thought it looked interesting, so I checked it out. Like I said, it was free, and it was a quick little game. I don't have much to say about it, but I actually do think it does deserve support, you know? It does deserve people to play it. Because it's a neat game. It's really well done. I just don't have much to say about it. Alright, now, probably the game you are most looking forward to hear my thoughts on Hollow Knight Silksong. I kind of lied when I said I was going to review it. I thought I was going to review it, but then I realized this is Hollow Knight, you know? Now, to give some context, I'll just give my impressions. To give some context, I was never that big of a fan of Hollow Knight, you know? I have the utmost respect for what that game is, and for what it did for Metroidvanias. And it is really cool to see just how big that game has got, and how, in turn, anticipated and, like, you know, hype that, Silksong got. Because we all celebrate Hollow Knight now. When that game first came out, I didn't really hear too many people talking about it. I don't even know when it was that I learned about it, but it was like it was a hidden gem when it came out. It wasn't until a lot later where people actually discovered it and realized, wait, this game's actually fucking awesome, right? I originally played it, like, at some point when I had a lot less patience when playing games, so obviously I got my ass kicked a lot. And it also confused the shit out of me because I wasn't familiar with Metroidvanias at the time, so I put it down. A few years later, I picked it back up, and it just wasn't for me. Like, I do really like Metroidvanias, and I will say I'm gonna reveal something to you guys. I'm not the best at video games. Like, you might think I'm good at video games because I play a lot of them and review them. I'm not good at them. So a game like Hollow Knight, you know, is a frustrating game. But I'm not gonna... I never once thought, like, it's too bad, you know. The way I always look at it is I'm bad. And it's not the game's fault, it's my fault. You know what I mean? So people saying that they need to, like, add difficulty options to Hollow Knight, maybe, like, there is a case to be made for that, just to make the game more accessible. But if the game is made with the intention of being challenging and get you to really, like, get good at it and, like, figure out how to beat certain bosses, then that's how the game was made, and that's kind of how the game should be played. But at the same time, I am, like, of the opinion that, you know, you want to make your game more accessible, then maybe you want to make it a little more easy. But it's kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I guess, yeah, that was kind of weird. I was talking about the first game and then also sort of the second game at the same time. Silksong, I guess I have the exact same opinion on Silksong as I do for the original. It's objectively really fucking good. This is, like, it's not made by a solo dev, but correct me if I'm wrong, I think Team Cherry is made up of, like, 3 or 4 people or something like that. It's not a big team, and this is only their second game. Their first game, and only game before this, was the first Hollow Knight. And seeing just how, like, just seeing the environments, the visuals, you know, even, like, the in-depth combat in this game, it's really cool. I will say, and this is awfully specific, but I never point this out in a game unless it specifically does it really well. By the way, in case you couldn't tell, this part's unscripted. You know, I don't really know how to script this part, but, like, the thing that I think, like, one very minute thing that Silksong does really well is its sound design. Like, it's really good. I know that's not, like, one thing anybody is talking about when it comes to this game, but, like, that's, like, I think, like, Silksong might win Best Sound Design at the Game Awards this year, you know? Like, it's really good. The game feels nice, too. It looks cool. It's just, I'm not sure if it's a game for me. I gotta get really good at it, and, it's all, but, like, there's so much coming out, you know? I'll definitely, like, I'm not giving up on this game or anything. I don't want you to come away from my impressions of Silksong thinking that I don't like this game. I have, like I said, I respect what this game is, and I like it to an extent, but it's just, I'm bad at it, and I don't have time to get good, you know what I mean? But I've spent time, like, avoiding boss fights, you know? Like, just exploring the game, exploring the atmosphere, unlocking abilities and stuff like that. It's really good. It's a really well-made game, you know? So I guess you wouldn't, with what I said, you wouldn't expect me to give too much, you know, like, that many opinions on, like, you know, the controversy about this game being too hard. I kind of did talk about that a bit ago. I do know that, like, you know, bosses take, like, 2 hits. Like, they take, like, 2 of your, like, things, you know what I mean? As opposed to 1, which makes the game harder. And I heard that they are patching in things to make the game more easy, but then it also kind of feels a little like patronizing, you know. It's like, okay, fine, you think this game is too hard, here you go, fucking, you know what I mean? Look, I don't have much more to say. I'm not that far into it. I'll play more of it eventually. It's just, I never got too into the first Hollow Knight. I guess that's like, it's not, I don't have like a hot take. I never once thought that the game was overrated. I just think maybe I never really got into it, and it never clicked with me. And Silksong is kind of like the same thing, just beefier and better, like objectively better. So I like, my opinion on Silksong probably isn't going to be that different from the first game, unless I am able to get into this game. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Silksong. Look, I'm happy everyone's enjoying it. I just don't think it's necessarily for me, and that's fine. Different strokes for different folks. But that's my impressions on Silksong. That's my review for Shinobi, for Snake Eater Delta, and Sword of the Sea. What are your thoughts on any of these games? Do you guys like any of the games? Not like them? Have you guys played them? Not played them? And if you haven't played them, do you guys want to play it? Not want to play it? Any of them? Anything about any one of these games, let me know down below. Anyways, be sure to like the video, comment, subscribe, or I'll make you very busy. Or I think that's what I said at the beginning. I don't know.